this tent. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. As ever, I'm Kev, your host, and I'm joined by the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe for the Fulham away preview podcast. James, how are you doing, mate?
Yep, really good, mate. I'm glad that the international break is coming to a thankful end because it ain't for me.
Says the man with the Roger Miller Cameroon shirt on.
I've worn my Cameroon shirt because I don't have a DR Congo shirt or a Burkina Faso shirt or anything like that, but it's the closest I could get, and this is the closest I really want to get to the internationals because I don't like them other than shirts from the era of 1984 to 1990. Best shirt era ever, and that was it. I wore my Denmark one for the last podcast, and people thought I was wearing a Southampton one.
Now they think you're a goalkeeper, so you know. There we go. Before we get started, those of you who have noticed that Tony's not with us, you might have seen on his Facebook page that he's been suffering from a little bit of ill health recently. Tony, both myself and James, hope you get better soon. Can't wait to have you back on the podcast because, to be quite honest, we need someone to take the piss out of, and no one when you're not here. No, seriously though, from both of us, mate. Get well soon, and we look forward to having you back. Okay then, James, that's us being nice out of the way. Fulham away. Well, usually I ask you what you're looking forward to, and I'm guessing hopefully downside better than the last time we went to Craven Cottage would be nice.
Blimey, yeah. Getting whacked 7-0 by the rampant championship champions at the time is not my idea of fun. Luckily, and I say this, touching any sort of wooden surface possible, they haven't got Alexander Mitrovic in the team anymore, who scored at least one customary goal against Luton every time I saw him. So he's gone off to chase the money. And now they've got Raul Jimenez, who hasn't scored for about 1 million years. And I hope that's 1 million years in one day by the time Luton play him.
Yeah, indeed so. Yeah, obviously that wasn't a great experience at Craven Cottage, albeit I'll tell anyone that I talk to that we sacked that off at half time. I'm absolutely convinced of it. I think it was Reading game that followed it was much more important in terms of qualifying for the playoffs than a game against the champions of that time. But if you go back the game before then, which was our first season in the championship, we ran them quite close. We only lost 3-2. I remember Dan Potts scoring that night. Once again, you're right, Mitrovic scored. But that was a much more competitive game, and I suspect that's more like the kind of game of football we're going to see Saturday as opposed to the absolute blowout that we saw, well, on that fateful Bank Holiday Monday.
I really hope so, because we need things to be going in a nice upward trajectory, and we've lost the first three, obviously, and so don't really want to lose the fourth. Found a nice statistic, actually. Luton have only lost the first 4 matches of a league season twice. One was way before we were around, but Tony would have seen it. It was in the black and white days. And the other one was 2002-03 season. And that was it. So that's the kind of football we've been accustomed to, isn't it? Not losing. So it's one of these where you probably think it's in the bracket or group of teams where points need to be taken.
And they are actually in that bracket. I think a lot of people said West Ham were, but, West Ham European champions, started the season well. They're probably not, but we just kind of hoped that they were, really. Whereas Fulham haven't started the season great. Probably a little overrated on some of the results that they have got, like their win against Everton. You look at the XGs, which I know that a lot of people within football look at, not so much fans, but Everton absolutely battered them. Just could not put the ball in the net, and then Fulham come along and, there you go, we'll stick it in the net, and that's that. Arsenal as well absolutely battered them, but didn't put them to the sword either. So that kind of bodes well. Another thing that sort of bodes well reading some statistics, Fulham have only won 2 of their last 8 Premier League home games without keeping a clean sheet in any of those, conceding 16 goals. And there's no improvement in their defence. They haven't signed any defenders on deadline day or in the transfer window or anything like that. So that's an area where hopefully we can exploit, particularly in light of the fact that we signed Sambi Lokonga on deadline day, who, according to Rob, and we'll play some of his press conference for you later in the episode, might well make his debut on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful he does. By all accounts, he's had a lot of... he's got up to speed with Arsenal. He's also got Premier League experience. We spoke about that in the last episode, probably about a season's worth of Premier League experience at Arsenal and Crystal Palace. Played a bit of European football as well for Arsenal, so that's not a bad thing. And yeah, really looking forward to that because of this potential formation change that we did speak about in the last one, but I think that this could be the start of it and where we see how that possibly works. I mean, I asked Rob about it at the press conference, and he gave us a few words about it. We'll hear about those soon, but I think that's a good shout that you recognised in the last one, where most teams are going 4-3-3, and we could see not necessarily that, but something close to that.
Yeah, I really think. I mean, I said it in the last podcast that we did when we when we did our monthly sort of recap of the first month of the season, that I very much see us transitioning into a 4-3-3 if you put the pegs on a Subbuteo table, funnily enough, like this. You know, obviously you're going to have 2 deeper midfielders to 1. And I guess when you see it play out, it look more like a 4-2-3-1 because the 2 wide attackers will be asked to do some defensive responsibilities as well. But in essence, you know, to simplify it would be a 4-3-3 with, you know, you're looking at, particularly after the way he played for Ireland in the international break, you're looking at Chio Ogbeni on one side of, I presume, Carlton Morris, and the way he started the season, you're probably looking at Jacob Brown on the other, albeit we did say that maybe Ryan Giles could play in front of Alfie Doughty down that left-hand side. But either way, I think we'll be a better side for 2 reasons. I think we'll be a better side because 2 defenders, more than enough to occupy Raul Jimenez in this game. Jimenez,
we hope.
Well, we do hope.
Let's hope he doesn't have one of those games.
We do, yeah. Of course, we hope that. And obviously, what happened to him when he was at Wolves and that head injury was absolutely terrible and traumatic and everything. But there is no getting away from the fact that even though he scored for Mexico in midweek, he's not been the same player since that head injury. He's barely scored a goal for Wolves. They've sold him to Fulham, who are. If we think that Fulham are within our range, Wolves certainly will do. So if they're going to sell their sort of supposed star striker to a direct rival, they obviously can't think too much of him. So I think 2 defenders on him will be enough. Don't need 3. I think it will. The two midfielders, as we said, one of them will fill in when we have the ball to effectively make it a 3 anyway. I just think it's much better suited to the way just with the football's going. I mean, if you watched England against Scotland, England played the 4-3-3. Scotland also, they kind of tried to play a 4-3-3. But the way England played it, there was no way that Scotland could get through. And I think that's how we're going to sort of try and transition it. You know, obviously we haven't got a Jude Bellingham, but Ross Barkley can be that kind of impactful player. And obviously he's had 2 more weeks of training, which is important. Lokonga's had 2 weeks of training with the squad. And I'm kind of hopeful about this game. I really am.
Well, I think we all have to be because, it's been going in little improvements, and Fulham obviously won the first game of the season, but they haven't since, and they got tonked by Man City. It's no disrespect to Fulham, everyone probably will do, and maybe we'll get a taste of that somewhere down the line.
We'll hold fire on the criticism of that one until December. Yeah,
but it hasn't gone as well as they'd hoped as well, I think, and we've already mentioned Jimenez, but he hasn't scored for such a long time in the Premier League. The one thing we've got to do is not give him anything, not give him any gifts to try and get him up and running, because you don't want to be that side that reinvigorates the form of players that are sort of not hitting their top form and not as good as they used to be. So there's that as well. By all accounts, there's talk that Iwobi might get his debut as well. But then again, he's been playing at Everton hasn't he? So
yeah, again, another one who's selling to a rival. So
Yeah.
it does make you wonder, doesn't it, about this Fulham side that they've on one hand they're taking players from. Well, they probably don't see them as rivals, do they? Because they probably think they're above that because they finished so high last season. But the odds would tell you differently. But then it obviously says that those selling clubs obviously either don't rate them or they don't see Fulham as part of their sort of rivals. But yeah, I'm very much in the sort of camp that Fulham are one of these sides that maybe they might be top of the pile of the sort of teams in our league, but they're definitely in amongst that league. I'd certainly say Fulham are more of it than West Ham anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all were very excited about West Ham because it was the first home game, but they have gone up levels in the last season and a half, really. So, and while Luton played reasonably well against West Ham, we talked about that and just the fact that the mistakes got ruthlessly punished. This is the start of a run of fixtures for Luton where we've got to be looking at taking points from.
Particularly now that Burnley game's been put in since we were last on the podcast. Really interesting that it's gone in that run. So now, like you say, we've now got Fulham away, Wolves at home, Everton away, Burnley at home. That's four, the 4 games against teams that I don't think any of those are going to be any higher than 13th this season, if they're even going to be that high. So, in essence, our season hasn't really started. It started, it stopped, it started, it stopped, and now it stopped. But now it really does start, and it's really big from Saturday onwards. And I'm really excited because we've improved with each game. And I think this formation switch, which Rob didn't confirm it, he's keeping his cards close to his chest, but he said enough to suggest that it's going to happen. Yeah. I think that's going to improve us more because I think he'll give us more balance to the side. It'll fill the spaces where teams are attacking us. That's the thing, because we're only getting killed in the same ways. It's not like we're getting opened up left, right and centre all over. It's the same goal has been scored against us far too often. But what it'll also do is it'll give Morris a bit more support, and it'll bring a bit more space for Barkley. He can just push forward because he picked up the ball on the edge of the box against West Ham so many times. Don't want you there, Ross.
Yeah.
You're great, mate. But I want you at the other end. Even if you wear 6, you don't have to play in the bloody 6th position.
Yeah.
Go forward. And I'm really excited about what his side can do on Saturday now.
Yeah, I am. It will be really interesting to see if that formation we think is going to happens. I really hope it does. I think they've got the personnel to do it now. And I think that unlocks, like you say, the more creative midfield players that will probably play in Chong and Barkley. And that's got to be an exciting prospect because that's really what you want to see them doing. On the same hand, I don't want to be discounting Fulham. I think they've still got a lot of those players that were in that Championship winning side, and they were fantastic. Admittedly they had Mitrovic, who was a flat track bully against everybody. He scored against everybody, set records for fun, didn't he? But they did have a lot of good players as well, particularly down the wings as well, and some of his sort of supporting strikers are still there, like Decordova-Reid and things like that. So they're still a dangerous side, but maybe things aren't quite clicking for him at the minute.
Yeah, hopefully with Decordova-Reid, Amari just trod on his foot as he got off the plane. At 10:30 this morning, he got off the plane. I don't know if Rob mentioned that enough in his press conference, but he got off the plane at 10:30 this morning, Thursday, as we record, like James says. Let's focus on Fulham. We'll come back to Luton in a minute. So obviously Mitrovic is gone. The thing I find most interesting about Fulham is they had a really good season last season, which again Rob touched on when he spoke about Marco Silva in his press conference. But the 2 standout players for them were the goalkeeper, Bernd Leno, whose numbers were way above anything that you'll ever see in this league compared to the shots that and goals that he should have conceded. He just had an absolute worldie of a season. And actually, to be fair, it started this season off in a similar vein, as I alluded to, against Everton. And João Paulinho was the other one, who I'm pretty sure was their player of the season, even with Mitrovic there. And was all set to go to Bayern Munich on deadline day, but it was like a Peter Roden Wingy situation. I think he pitched up ready to knock on the door, but no one was home, and he had to come back again, and has since signed a new contract. But he's a defensive midfielder, He's their Marvellous Nakamba, if you like. So it's interesting that for a side that had Mitrovic, Willian, De Cordova-Reid, Harry Wilson, that the two players that everyone raved about last season were the goalkeeper and a defensive midfielder. So maybe from that point of view, that's why Luton fans can get excited about this one, because it's not like a West Ham side who've got an Antonio. It's not like a Brighton side who've got a Mitoma or a Ferguson through the middle, and it's certainly not a Chelsea side who've got God knows how many millions and millions of pounds. Maybe this is a side who are reliant on defensive players a little bit too much, and someday that's going to come a cropper.
Yeah, well, I hope it's Saturday, really. Yeah, I mean, they do have good players, and they had a lot of pace in that Championship side. And I think, they stayed up, as did all the promoted teams last season, which is something to look at and emulate. It's not going to be the same thing. And Rob did talk about that in his press conference as well. Which I kind of like, because everything we'll do it the Luton way, which is good. I think people react well to that. It's despite the fact that they stayed up, it is the levels, isn't it? Really, what we saw in the Championship was a very good, fluent side, very pacey. But then you go to the Premier League, and they're not the big fish anymore. So they've lost, their main focal point, who was never really that great in the Premier League anyway. He was Championship, he was too good for, not quite good enough for the Premier League. But
he started last season well, didn't he? But then there was that Man United incident in the Cup, and Fulham have just been a bit of a basket case since then, really. When Mitrovic assaulted the referees a little bit too strong, but obviously got into trouble for that, and Silva on the same day and everything else. They're a club who, to me, and I'm not a Fulham fan, I don't really watch too much of them, to be fair, but obviously I've watched a little bit before this podcast. They're a club to me that when it starts going wrong, they can take a good hammering, but when you let them get on the front foot, they can give you a 7-0 bashing, and obviously our test is to not let them get on the front foot, to get in front. And let's be honest, Fulham fans, the ones that stay till the end, and there aren't many of them, are going to be going to Craven Cottage on Saturday expecting 3 points against Luton. Fulham are heavily odds on to win the game. So if Luton can get in front, or even stay level with them 30, 35 minutes or whatever the current term is to get the crowd to turn, maybe then we'll get some joy.
Yeah, I hope so. They are favourites. I saw today as well when I was looking online for stuff about Fulham. I did come across that Raul Jimenez was odds on to be the first goal scorer as well at any time. I don't know if that's still the same by the time this podcast come out, but I'm not sure what games people have been watching to come up with those odds. Although not a betting man myself, maybe that's a good bet to put something on there. I think it is a good time to come up against Fulham. They obviously will be favourites. Because they have been in the league a season more, they're more established, they've been in the Premier League a few times, but because they're home. And, as we've seen with certain people, certain pundits, giving Luton absolutely no chance, that is just the way we're just going to have to take it. I think you should more ignore it, but that's what we're going to have to put up with, people saying that. But I think that, with the 2 weeks that they've had to work on this new formation, which will mostly be the players that they had at their disposal over these 2 weeks, the international players that went off will either play in a position that's familiar to them, or they won't be in that starting squad. So I think that, you'd like to think that this 2 week break is going to be of real benefit to Luton.
Yeah, I think, let's talk about Luton then. We've kind of alluded to the change in formation, but the starting 11, really, of the internationals, the ones that are guaranteed to start, the ones that have been away, the ones that are guaranteed to start would only be, Ogbene, or he's not guaranteed to start, but if we assume that the formation's going to change, he would likely start, and Amari Bell. The others, Pelly hasn't started the last two. Cabore's been on the bench for both of the home games, and obviously Tom Lockyer ended up not going away, and Rob has confirmed that he's fit for this game. So the internationals aren't necessarily going to impact us too much. I think Rob said Amari's okay to play, but he's going to manage him between now and certainly the next international break, which says to me he's not going anywhere near Exeter in a couple of weeks' time. I wish I could say the same thing, but that's not the case. So if we're going with a back four, are we looking at something along the lines of maybe Bell, Lockyer, Burke, Doughty?
That would be what I would assume. Yeah, as a four.
I mean,
yeah.
obviously you've got Giles, but I suspect if he plays, and we don't know, but I suspect if Giles does play, he'll play one of the further forward, because you don't really want a left back down at the byline pinging crosses in, because otherwise you ain't solved the problem at all, have you?